So, welcome to the Success and Happiness podcast. I'm Colin Durrant, your host, and today we've got Dean Coulson. So, Dean is a complete nutrition and fitness geek, is how he described himself. He decided to leave his lucrative job in IT and start up his own health and fitness company called Phoenix Performance Training and also Lean Warrior. He got sick of seeing so many people who were in desperate need to improve their lives through health and fitness, and decided to help as many people as he could. He's been involved in martial arts for over 30 years, studying several different martial arts to black belt level, and is also certified self-protection instructor, and is one of the few people who studied under the world-renowned Geoff Thompson and his real combat system to second dan level. He's an international best-selling author of The Fit Formula, and he spends his time writing for various publications, including being a feature writer on nutrition for the UK's biggest selling martial arts magazine, Martial Arts Illustrated. Loves sharing his knowledge of health and nutrition and how emotional healing is the key to unlocking your true potential. Loves presenting and regularly talks in schools and businesses. Mentors other trainers in the UK and the world in nutrition and training advice, and on it goes. So welcome, Dean. We got through that long intro.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it is a long intro, isn't it? I'm honoured to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. That's great to have you. So I wanted to start with what Lean Warrior is. What's Lean Warrior all about?
Yeah, well, that's a concept that came up in 2014, and it was when I was really heavily involved in the martial arts, and it literally meant lose weight, win fights. That's what it was, Lean Warrior. But as that evolved, the concept of Lean Warrior changed, and it changed to really find your essence, face your adversity, where, lean meaning stripping away all the superfluous, all the excess, all the things that we have in our lives that we don't really need, but we brought them in for somewhere. It could be some thoughts, it could be, the things that we do, the words that we use, anything that was excessive to like being the essence of who we are. So that's how it kind of evolved. And warrior literally means having the courage to face yourself. The inner version of you, all those beliefs and stories that you hold, usually protect yourself in some way. So Lean Warrior sort of evolved from lose weight, win fights to find your essence, face your adversity. So it was always about facing the inner version of yourself that most people, don't want to do, because it's a very scary place to go. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but by doing it, it kind of liberates your soul. But it is the work.
It's those inner thoughts, isn't it? And I know a lot of people will do anything, I guess, whether that's working stupid hours, whether that's drinking or drugs or all sorts of things to get away from those voices in their head, basically.
Yeah, because we always move away from pain, and physical pain we get. You don't put your hand on fire, or you might do it once when you're young, but you'll not do it again. You don't remember that, or you're not stepping in front of a bus, or we have that awareness of I don't want that kind of physical pain, but it's the emotional pain that people don't really understand, and we'll always move away from pain, whatever kind of pain it is. And so if we're triggered emotionally, then we will move away, and we'll create some kind of belief, a story to take us away from that, or action, be it alcohol, be it drugs, gambling, emotional eating, porn, whatever that is. We'll use that as a trigger to move us away from the perceived pain. We might not be even aware of it. We'll just go and automatically do it. But by understanding that we have control of that, we can control that. Understanding the triggers and being able to respond differently is massively important. And it always starts with awareness. Having that awareness of, we can take back control of this. We don't have to do these things. We understand, okay, what is this pain? What is this discomfort that I'm reacting to? And if we can just catch ourselves, if we can just pause for a moment, and instead of engaging, just observing what's going on, then we have that power to respond differently. And it's really powerful.
I've had in the past, I'd wake up at whatever time, and then even now I wake up and my brain's just going 100 miles an hour. And I'm a lot better now. I can get back to sleep eventually. But used to, I get up and I'd have to get up basically because it was those thoughts, and you're like, I can't lie here listening to all these thoughts going on.
Yeah.
But having done a lot of work in the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, and realizing the huge power and benefit into actually listening to those thoughts and then going, well, what's that about? What's the emotion behind that, and releasing that.
Yeah.
And just, I guess, having peace with it, and just the biggest thing that changed for me was going, I'd have these thoughts, and my initial response was like, yeah, I try and bury it again.
Yeah.
And then I was like, no, hit me with whatever you've got, because I want to deal with it. And that was just the best thing, the most powerful thing, because it's like, yeah, I can take whatever you're going to hit me with. So you hit me, and I'll release the emotion around it.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important, because men are really good at burying emotions. We're conditioned that way. We're culturally conditioned that way for over so many millennia. It's been going on for a long time. We don't show emotions. We don't show weakness. Showing emotions are a form of weakness, but they're not. There's just a body where humans physiologically, emotions are trying to tell us something. Thoughts of the mind, emotions are of the body. So as you said, when a thought comes up, sometimes it's because of the thought-feeling loop, where thoughts create emotions, create thoughts, and we get stuck. Yeah, and we try and process it from a mind level. But if we understand how the brain works, where physiology trumps psychology only 100% of the time, where, in times of threat or stress or feeling unsafe, our body down-regulates the thinking human part of the brain, the logical part of the brain, the rational part of the brain, and gets us to react and do what we did the last time when we faced whatever trigger that has, triggered this stress or threat. And then when you understand that, then you can take control of it. You can understand that it's by design.
Yeah.
We down-regulate the thinking part of the brain because we want to react, because if there's danger, we don't have to waste vital seconds thinking about whether we should run or fight. We just react, and that's how the brain works. But sometimes it gets wired wrongly, for want of a better word, where it perceives this threat, and then we go and do this. But by understanding and having that awareness, we can change that.
Yeah, I know. I've also a lot of your thoughts and feelings aren't real, so a lot of it's just made up.
Yeah,
and also something about this, there's thoughts are like little bits of energy just kind of flying through your head.
That's right.
But I had quite a big breakthrough a little while ago about thoughts and feelings, and I'd be walking the dogs, and I would make something up in my head that, at the time I thought was true. So, there'd be like a car parked on the side of the road, and then I'd be like, oh, I've got to walk around this into the road with the dogs and everything else. And then I'd be like, yeah, then someone else is an old lady is going to come, and she's going to have to go on the road, then she'll probably get run over. And, and this whole narrative just goes off into and then this guy's a complete nutter wanker who drives the car, and he's unaware of all of this, and I get really angry about it, and even my temperature would change. That's the emotion behind it.
Yeah.
And then I would be like, it's all made up.
Yeah.
Like, none of this is real.
Yeah.
It's all completely made up. And that was just such a major breakthrough to realize that, and then to catch myself in future going, you start going down this road and you're like, hang on a minute, this is just made up.
Yeah.
Not real.
And it's usually made up because our brain makes it so to keep us safe. It says,
yeah,
we want to deal with that right now. Let's just create this perception, and then we'll run with that. And so many people don't understand that we are not our thoughts.
Yes.
Thoughts go. There's thousands of thoughts every single day. We get to choose the thoughts we believe based on the perception that we have and the conditions we have and the repressed emotions that we have that get triggered. There's so many nuances to that if we understood it, it's even anxiety. I saw someone talking the other day about anxiety. At a surface level, the difference between excitement and anxiety is a lack of clarity. So that's like with what's in front of you. But but that's not just because anxiety is just a failure of your brain to predict a response, because we're the only animals or species on the planet who try and look to the future and try and predict the future, which you can't do that. So the brain sees that as unsafe. So it creates these anxious, fearful feelings to protect ourselves. But if we go to a deeper level, sometimes it's not just about what's in front of us. If we've got, we've had some kind of overwhelming traumatic experience of our past, or we've got some repressed emotions from that, that's the driver. It's not what's in front of you. That's just the trigger of things that are deeper. And as you said, once you allow yourself to sit with that emotion, bring awareness to that there's an emotion there. And something, you know, when I work with my coaching clients, I use something called Trinity Coherence, where we look at the thoughts, the emotions created by the thought, and the sensations in the body as a result of the emotion. And so we go from mind, and then we go from emotion to body. So we see what the sensations are being brought up, because all emotions are energy in motion. And if we are pushing these emotions down because they're painful in some way, then we're trapping this energy. And so
exactly.
we use energy to keep them trapped as well. So like as you said, everything's about energy, whether it's thoughts, whether it's, you know, emotions, whether we're repressing stuff. So by being able to having the courage, I suppose you could say, to firstly have awareness that they're there, allowing yourself to sit with them, and then feeling into where those emotions are coming up for you in the body. It could be the head, it could be the throat, it could be the, you know, the chest, it could be the stomach, it could be deeper. And all those have different meanings metaphysically in the body. And when we understand that, or you know somebody who can help you understand that, then you can see and release whatever trauma you've had in the past. And you don't even need to know what that trauma is, because the sensations in the body are telling you there's something here. I just want you to recognize this. I want you to feel into this. And when you do that, and you allow yourself to do that, and you're brave enough to be able to just allow it to dissipate and release, I suppose you could say, then the stories and beliefs that you've had to protect you about this unsafe feeling just go away. And your perception changes about a lot of things. So really your brain's there, and the stories and beliefs are there to protect you in some way.
Yeah, because a lot of that's come from being as a child, when you know, things happen to you which as a child or can be quite traumatic to you as a child.
Yeah.
And then you develop systems in place to protect yourself. So the brain goes, okay, so we're gonna create a belief system that, you know, when you can't find your mom in the supermarket, for example, that, you know, it's not the end of the world, or maybe it can be like, yeah, you're on your own, you've got to be able to fend for yourself, you know, if you get left in the supermarket, you know, you've got to be able to survive by yourself, and all these kind of little things that it just develops, you know, it just jumps to a conclusion, creates a system.
Yeah.
But when you're older as an adult, you don't need those systems anymore, but they're still in you.
Absolutely. I mean, I've worked with somebody who had claustrophobia, but what it actually was when he was younger, his siblings had made him watch a horror film and locked him in a cupboard straight afterwards. You can imagine the emotion, the fear that you locked into that and then thrown in a cupboard and left him there for ages. I mean, even my son, scared of dogs from, you know, a very young age, where my next door neighbor had a Labrador, soft as clots, you know, and came over when he was a toddler, 2 or 3 years old, came over to lick his face, but knocked him on his bum, and he just started crying. So to him, that was a big scary monster come to eat him, but really it wasn't. But that was his perception locked at that age. And from, you know, he had a massive phobia about dogs, to the fact that he created a story that he didn't go anywhere where dogs might be off the lead. So he would never go to the beach, didn't like the beach, didn't like walking beside rivers. You know, anywhere where you might see a dog. And it wasn't that he didn't like the beach, it was the fact that his brain saying, if you go to the beach, there's dogs on the lead and they're all coming to eat you. That was basically what was happening. I mean, even when he was 13-year-old, even like being on the beach, he would jump on my back if a dog came anywhere near him, even if they weren't even bothered about him, which mostly they weren't. You know, so it was one of those things where created that story that I don't like the beach. But it wasn't about that. And I've worked with people who don't like exercise, but it was just because they had a bad experience with exercise when they were younger. You know, bad PE teacher at school, you know, making them do things they hated doing, so they just hate exercise. But then I've seen people who then instill that in their children.
Exactly, yeah. It travels through, doesn't it? Travels down the line.
Yes, and that's, it's so sad that, really, because we don't want to be able to have that influence just because we've had that influence and are unable or unwilling to deal with it ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of it's also when you're unaware of that. So like your son when he's older and he's got married and kids and things, and then they go to
Yeah,
the beach and he's like, I'm not going to the beach, and
yeah,
then you kind of have this argument about how he hates the beach, but you don't really know what's actually behind that,
that's right.
and then you miss out on so many things because it's like, well, actually, if you unpicked it, you'd realize what the issue was, and then you just experience so much more in life.
That's absolutely true. And so, how many people are stuck in that way where they're just stuck in that malaise. They're just happy. They say they're happy with what they're doing, but are they really? Have they decided that they cannot have the dreams when they were a teenager of doing this and doing that, where in fact they can. It's just they have such a strong belief over a long period of time that they can't see past it. They're not able to have that 30,000-foot view, that big step back, just to see, that they're in this sort of this bubble, this world, first world problems of one, and they've just created these stories and beliefs. And as you said earlier, even I think it was Byron Katie who said, then you have this thought or belief, but then you challenge it. Is it true? Who would I be without this thought or belief? And that's the scary thing, because it's the identity around that. Who would I be if I wasn't like that? My mom's the same thing. Who would I be if I didn't play the sympathy card and want people to, say, how are you doing? Or look after me. All of a sudden I don't have that kind of.
It's endorphins, isn't it? And it's they're made significant by their suffering, and they get endorphins from people looking after them. So they go, well, if you take that away, what am I left with?
Yes. Yeah, who am I? Where's my happiness going to come from? They don't realize that happiness is a choice, and they can choose to have that anytime they want. But they create so many stories and beliefs around that they don't see that.
Yeah. I just wanted to talk as well about swimming, actually, because you're also a cold water swimmer like us, and everyone that seems to come on the podcast has got some kind of cold water experience. And I know that really helps focus the mind, that because you're very focused, when your body's on fire and, you're kind of focused, you can't think about other stuff. So I know that helps a lot with mental health and that sort of thing. But what's your experience with cold water swimming?
With my experience, it brings up a lot of emotions. Not all the time. I would say most of the time I don't want to go in. Most of the time. But I remind myself of the fact that once I'm in, it's never as bad as I'm creating. And then I get a massive dopamine hit. It raises your dopamine levels about 250%. It's probably on par with cocaine, with like the hit of dopamine that you get raised. But what I love about it is the fact it allows me to release emotions. I can go in, I can shout, I can scream, I can sing, which is what we're doing at the moment. My wife is singing the 12 Days of Christmas every time we go in to allow ourselves to get in. And yesterday, for example, I didn't want to be there at all. But I don't engage in that. I'm aware of it. So the feeling's there, but I'm observing it. And then I'll share it with Joy, or she'll share that with me. Don't really want to go in today. That's okay. We're just going to do that anyway, because it's, as we said before, the thing is never the thing, but it allows us to express certain emotions. It allows us to sit with that discomfort. And I think for me, that's the most powerful thing. It forces you to look at something that you might not otherwise do.
Yeah. It's also the thing when you're actually, I don't know how far away you are, but we're probably about 25 minutes away from where we go swimming.
Yeah.
And you know that as much as you don't really want to go in, you know that you're going to go in.
Yeah.
And you're on that journey and everything else, and you know that you're going to go in. And I find that's really powerful, especially, when you stand on the edge of the water. I know you kind of have to walk in on the beach.
Yeah.
But when you stand on the edge and you're going to go in, and your brain's just having a heart attack, basically. You're just like, how am I going to convince this guy not to jump in the water?
Yeah.
And you just know that, that you're going to go in and waiting, you're just going to get colder waiting around. So you might as well go in. That's really helpful. We've just started swimming without wetsuits in the cold. And that's helpful to go. The longer I'm standing on the edge, the colder I'm getting anyway. So I might as well just go in.
Yeah.
But when you're in a wetsuit and you're warm and cozy, it's a little bit more difficult, because you're kind of standing there going, it's going to hurt when I get in, and it's but you're going to go in anyway, and it's just, you just kind of fight with your brain almost.
Yeah, it's almost it gets to a point where I just allow the chatter. It's really, and it's it's an experience thing. It's something that you've got to experience and work through, but then detaching yourself so you're not jumping into any drama that your brain's creating, and you're just looking at the facts, the data that's right in front of you, and say, okay, water is here, I am here, it's time to go in. Doesn't matter what the drama is, I'm still going to go in regardless. And I've gotten to a point now, most of the time, because sometimes you still get caught out, is I'm just listening to that chatter and I'm just laughing. I might even share it with Joy, saying, listen to what my brain's saying today, and we'll have a laugh about what stories it's creating for us. Stop going in, but then you're right. Then we just go in anyway. It's just prolonged. Like this morning, we got there just before sunrise, but there was clouds on the horizon, and so instead of going straight into the water, because it was about 200 yards to walk from where we leave because the tide was out, we actually just waited and watched. We allowed ourselves to be in the moment, and just crossed our arms and just waited for the sun to rise above the clouds, and then we went in. We're getting to that point now. Even yesterday, the sea temperature dropped a whole degree, and it doesn't do that usually. It's usually it just goes up and down, and then it might get that sort of downward trend towards the winter. But yesterday it just dropped a whole degree, and me and Joy didn't even notice. Didn't even in the sea, we didn't even notice. I thought, oh, that's interesting.
We definitely noticed the degree drop at the moment.
Yeah, we didn't, and that was the weird thing. And and now it's a degree colder, and again, even today we just walk in. We're not like these run in, run out scenario. It's just we just wade in, and then we're there. Yes, we'll still get that intake of breath, that cold shock, but it's being aware and observing that reaction, and then focusing on the breathing. And then when you're in that focused moment, then it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling.
Do you actually swim around, or do you just sort of immerse yourself?
It depends on the tide, depends on how the surf is. It was quite flat this morning, so we actually did that. Actually did a video of Joy swimming, but then she stands up and it's up to just above her knees, because obviously with the tide going up and down and the waves coming in and out, it's interesting. But sometimes it can be the surf can be too rough. Like it was yesterday. We were in the dark yesterday because Joy was going to work. So sunrise is 8:30, which I had to leave before then. So we were in just after 7 o'clock. So we got our head torches on, which is interesting. But again, it's just depends on the sea and the tide. It's better if you're in a lake because you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
Day on day, the sea changes its mind.
But swimming in the dark's a whole different experience, isn't it? Because I mean that just brings up a lot of fear because you just can't see what you're getting into or anything like that.
You can't, especially with the sea. So it's like we're more cautious. Then we'll probably just dip there. We'll just sit and we're just like there's sometimes that we can't get in because the way we're lucky because even if there's like an 8-foot surf, for example, the waves like only 8 feet. The sandbanks further out because the break on the sandbanks first. So it's easier to get in, but we can't get all the way in, so we're kind of doing these deep squats to try and get as low into the water as possible because we can't get further out, especially in the dark. As you said, it creates that extra level of fear.
Yeah I remember because we used to swim on a Friday morning, and we were always the first ones in. And I always used to imagine like there was someone had driven past with this big truck with a shark in the back, and they dropped it off into the lake. And we were the first ones to get in there and just get like eaten. But it's amazing the stories and stuff that you come up with it just creates the fear.
I think by doing that it kind of disarms the fear as well, because fear is just a biological process. It's preparing us to run a fight, but we create these big 3D scary monsters with our thoughts, but that's all they are unless we take some form of action on the fear that we're feeling. And once you sort of disprove the fear by stepping into it anyway, like these 3D monsters just become 2-dimensional cartoons, and then you can have a laugh, and then it removes the seriousness. I think that's why we're doing a lot of singing at the moment. Everything obviously it's the 12 days of Christmas at the moment, but it's just like it makes it fun. You're taking the stress and the threat and the feeling, the unsafe feeling away, and you're giving yourself a different focus. It's almost like when the easiest way to upregulate your thinking part of your brain from a stressful response is to get curious. You can't be curious and scared at the same time. So just bringing that different approach and just creating that different perspective makes a massive difference.
So where does fear come into martial arts? I mean, did you competed, I'm guessing, as well, and how does that fear? Because I'm always, watch a lot of UFC, a big UFC fan, and it's not about the brutality, it's about everything behind it. It's about firstly doing things properly, that they have coaches in the different areas of martial arts, and they have their nutrition done, and there's so many things they have to do right, because someone's going to punch you in the face, basically, and that's not nice. So you do everything you can to not get punched in the face.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting when a lot of the fighters actually admit to the fear and everything else, because people watch and they go, oh, they're not fearful, but they are fearful. But I guess they conquer their fear. What's your experience with that?
I think it's kind of what Susan Jeffer said, like, feel the fear and do it anyway in martial arts.
Yeah.
Being able to override that and know that it's just a biological response. It's a fight or flight response. If you think of it, if you break it down from a biological level, where, if you are under stress or threat, your stress response kicks in, your fight or flight response kicks in. If you know biologically, then all the blood moves away from the stomach into your limbs. Your vision narrows. You always become blinkered. Your pupils dilate very widely, so you can see more in front of you. You're very aware of what's going on, of any kind of danger. That's just a biological response. But then we attach stories and beliefs and emotions around that. From a martial arts perspective, I did martial arts from when I was 15 years old. I got my first black belt when I was 17 in 1988. But I was always, I thought when I got my black belt, I wouldn't be scared anymore of fighting, but I was. Nothing changed. Yes, I could punch and kick, but I still couldn't do it. It wasn't until I started buying books from Geoff Thompson, by Geoff Thompson in 1999. Because I was kind of drawn to him. I think I found him on Amazon. I was obviously searching for something. I found his books, read all his books, bought every book he had. And he's a world authority in self-protection. He certainly was back then. And, he was quite controversial in creating Animal Days, where it's like a more extreme version of, or it probably was what UFC is like now, where he was pressure testing martial arts, all the different ranges, the punching range, which is the shortest range, the kicking range, the grappling or ground, range. And then they were hitting each other, to try and knock each other out. And then it went to the ground pretty quickly. And then they just grabbed the gloves off. There was people around, spotters grabbing the gloves off, and they went for the choke. And it was just pressure testing, and you got so much shit for that. But all he was doing is he wanted to know what was real, and that's how I gravitated to him. And I went to it was 2003. I drove down to Coventry, 250 miles from me, and went to one of his self-defense seminars with Peter Considine, and that was amazing. I was hooked. I wanted to know more about this and about fear and how he conquered his fear, because that's why Geoff went on the door for 9 years, because he was similar. He got a black belt. He still felt massive fear, and that's I did as well. I had an experience with a bully. In my, I can't remember how old I was. It was probably late teens, so it was late 80s, early 90s, and that was the big wake up call for me, and I was scared shitless. We'd been to and froing. He'd been staring at me. I've been staring at him. I didn't really know him. Didn't know why he was doing it, but I wasn't, but one night I was just getting into my car with my then girlfriend, who was now my wife, and he just came out of nowhere, and I just shut the door and locked it, and I was terrified. And he was telling, he was telling me what he was going to do. He was going to rip my face off, rip my arms and legs off, blah, blah, blah. And I was terrified, but then I was angry because of that reaction. And I remember going home, because I still lived at home, and I was telling my dad, and I was so pissed off by it, and I couldn't live with it. So I actively started looking for him, because I couldn't handle that feeling. I think at the time I actually felt like a coward. That was the feeling.
But you see that feeling, sorry, just to interject, that when someone punches you in the face, it's not the physical pain.
Yeah.
It's the emotion.
Yes, it's the emotion. Yes.
That's what affects you, not the physical pain.
That's right. Yeah. That's what will sit with you and sit in your hard drive, and whether you deal with it or not, or repress it down. But then that's going to skew your worldview, and you're going to see things differently. I eventually found out where he lived, and I went and knocked on his door. And he wouldn't, he was telling us he was going to take us down the beach. And I said, well, let's go. But he had his big old English sheepdog barking right beside him. I said, put your dog away. Let's go right now. And I was still scared. don't get me wrong, I was shaking, but I had to bury it. I had to, overcome it. And he wouldn't. He backtracked, and I never saw him again.
But you see, when someone acts like that, when they're very aggressive, they're compensating.
Yeah. Yes.
Mostly from fear.
Yes.
So he's probably more scared than you. Yeah. To counteract that, he's just shouting and going, "I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this," and everything else. You go, "Well, okay, let's go." He's like,
Yeah, exactly that. And when you sort of bring it to him, then you call him out, and then they back down. They don't always do that. And when I eventually, I know exactly, but you've got to know that, and that's why I went to train with Geoff Thompson. I think it was 2010, and I trained with him for 5 years. I went down every month for 5 years to train with Geoff personally in his master classes to understand. First, I went down to understand what fear was and do the physical stuff, but then Geoff led physical and metaphysical, and he went into the deeper stuff. Talking about self-protection starts with self. Protecting yourself against your inner bully, that voice inside your head that stops you from moving forwards. And that was massive for me. That really sort of explained a lot of different things. And then, as I said, I was invited onto his black belt course, which was a 12-month course, and went and we did that. And yes, as I said, the physical aspect was there. It had to be there because the physical aspect kind of exhausts you, so it exposes you mentally and emotionally. And it certainly did over the time period I was there. But but Geoff's premise was always self-protection was awareness, avoidance, escape. Being aware of your surroundings and avoiding anything that felt dangerous, and then escaping. But as he always used to say, monkeys fall out of trees, and sometimes you find yourself in a position where you weren't paying attention, and then it came down to preemption. So if awareness, avoidance, escape failed you because you weren't paying attention, then it was preemption. It was hit first, hit hard, then escape. And that was always Geoff's way. And I've used it once or twice since, not recently, in the past. And you get to, the more you do it, the more you get to understand when people are just posturing and when they're actually serious. Because you could, if you're aware of that and you're good at that, you could balloon and posture yourself and make them back down. It's almost so they can save face. And I've done that a few times, but other times people just want to fight. And so it's about hitting first, hitting hardest, hitting first, and then getting away. And there was obviously techniques to that, which I teach when I do seminars and workshops. But yeah, fear's a powerful thing, and you can control people.
Yeah. Whole nations are controlled by fear, aren't they? That's the best way to control everybody is by fear.
The last few years.
Yes. Fear of what might happen. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely that. And just how, but yeah, that's exactly how people are controlled.
So do you do a lot of fear control and that sort of thing with your clients then?
It's not fear control. I don't really talk fear in that regard. It's all about really helping them understand their emotions and what they actually are, because we'll trigger it as fear in a fearful way because it's being labeled as unsafe at some point. We always move away from pain, so create those fearful thoughts. But it's really just helping them understanding themselves, their body, their emotions, the sensations, what the body's doing, because it's always talking to you. We just don't pay attention. There's all, whatever sensations we have, whether it's a headache or a runny nose or, itchy eyes, it's not always hay fever. It could be something else or something deeper in the body. We just don't get into the body enough. And it's helping people understand that and getting safe, feeling safe to do so. Because if we don't feel safe, we'll never get into that. We'll never get into those deeper rooted emotions because our nervous system is just too jacked and goes into the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight response. We want to be able to get into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest, our calm center, as much as possible, and be able to create that calmness when we then start exploring these, these deeper sensations, which we often label as fear.
Yeah, because that whole fight or flight is extremely energy intensive. So it sucks a huge amount of energy out of you to be in that all the time.
Yeah.
And you can't think straight when you're in that either, because you just
think at all. You react. Your brain just says, no, you're not thinking. You've got to react and get yourself out of this. However that, whatever that is. And it's instant, because it's been programmed. It's fired and wired, as I say. But because we know that and we've done that initially to protect ourselves, we can reverse it. We can change it. by then creating different responses, different behaviors.
And a lot of that probably comes from being in our childhood where there's something's happened, and then that's put you into that fight or flight for the rest of your, or there's something that triggers you quite easily back into that fight or flight mode.
Yes, absolutely. As I said before, emotion, energy, and motion. And so it's very energetic. Everything's energy. Even like not facing something, whether it's a fearful thing or not making a decision, you're still creating an open loop, because you're not putting it to bed. You're not saying, okay, that's what I'm doing, or that's what I'm not doing. Thinking, oh well, I'm not quite I'm not gonna decide just yet. And so the energy's still there in the background. Everything's energetic. And it's one of the first things when I check in with myself. I always check in with myself multiple times throughout the day. I've got an app called Habit Bull for Android. I don't know what it is for iOS. And it just pops up and says, check in with yourself, elevate your energy. And then, so, you know, I could be in the middle of, obviously I'm not going to check it on doing a podcast, but like if I'm doing any kind of work, or if I'm out and about, I allow myself just to stop and just check in with myself. Where's my energy right now? Is it is it ugh? You know, am I doing something that I don't like or shouldn't be doing? Why am I doing it? So I can then challenge myself, because sometimes you easily get drawn in. You're doing something for somebody else, but you don't really want to do it. So why are you doing it? Oh, well, because they might feel a certain way. Yeah, but what about how you feel? And we just kind of put ourselves down the pecking order far too much instead of setting boundaries.
Yeah, I think we've spoken about that before as well, about how men, you know, in a family environment where you've got, you know, the mum and a couple of kids and a dog and the husband, for example, and that traditional setup is always the last person. You know, they're the least important.
Yeah,
they're the most important in terms of providing the safety and everything else around, but actually they feel the least important. They don't get that sort of, you know, their well-being, etc., is not important. They have to do everything for everybody else.
Yeah, I think men, even more so now, kind of losing that place in the world. They don't quite know where they fit, and then they fall into these people-pleasing habits. I know I have done that in the past, and that comes up every now and then. But I'm aware of it, and I can then deal with whatever that is energetically. But a lot of men think that's the way it should be. That's why they let themselves go. That's why they get overweight as they get older. Instead of setting boundaries and saying, if I can create my own boundaries, if I can put myself first, if I can allow my energy to rise. So if we're down the pecking order, that means we've done everything for everybody else. That means we're running about 30%. So that means you can only ever give out 30%, whatever 30% is. But if you put yourself first and set boundaries and then look after yourself, your health, your well-being, your energy will rocket. And as a result of that, you give more of that out. We can't, you know, work from an empty cup, and yet so many men do. So it's about really understanding that, stop avoiding, you know, the emotional landmines that we have, the emotional splinters that I talk about, you know. And what I mean by that is, you know, we've got these situations, overwhelming experiences from some time in our lives, and just like a normal splinter, you know, if you don't get it out after a time, you don't feel it anymore. But if you just catch it in the right place, you're reminded that it's there. Emotion splinters are exactly the same. So it would be okay, don't deal with it, but every now and then you're reminded of it, and the pain's there, and then you go and react and do whatever you do to protect yourself. It's about being able to recognize those and remove those. And men don't do that often enough. They keep repressing these emotions down because we're, you know, showing emotions.
That's what we taught. Yeah. Even in movies, they tell us, you know, bottle it up, put it away.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah. You know, stop crying, you know, and all that kind of thing. And it's rubbish. You know, we're all humans, men and women, we're all humans. Physiologically, we're the same. You know, how we work with emotions work the same way. So it's one of those things where we get to recognize that and recognize that it's okay. And I think sometimes, you know, well, I know that men have massive shame around that, showing emotions, asking for help, should be able to do it themselves, should be that lone wolf, you know, working by themselves. But that's not why we're here. We're not here for that. And if we, you know, by recognizing that, and it's great to be able to, you know, even if you don't work with a coach, have a peer group, have a group of guys around that you trust, that you can, you know, it's not just about the camaraderie, but being able to, you know, share you know, these thoughts and feelings without feeling that shame. But it's the shame, you know, shame likes us to be alone. That's how shame is cultivated. That's how it grows. That's how it stays. It keeps us in that lonely space. But if we share, then we often recognize that other men are feeling exactly the same.
Yeah.
And it's okay to do that, and it's okay to feel that. And then the shame starts to leave us. But it's the shame that keeps us stuck.
I mean, it's really about being the best you can be as yourself, and then you can serve your family or your friends even better. You know, the better, the more you look after yourself, and the stronger you are, and the more, you know, the more you take care of yourself, then you can serve others significantly more than if you're, like you say, an empty cup.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Well, what we've got to do is recognize is, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we look at it from a level where if we get the foundations right. So the first one is, you know, is our survival needs met? Have we got food? Have we got water? Have we got shelter? You know, are we procreating because we're survival of the species? If that's there, then the next one up is, you know, our safety needs. Do we feel safe physically, mentally, emotionally? And if we do, or we have the tools to be able to get rid of those, then that's great, because we've built a solid base then to move into self-esteem, love and belonging, you know, all those other things that we aspire to be. But if we keep trying to aspire to be somebody without dealing with the fact that we're repressing emotions, every time we get triggered, it's like the house of cards just falls down, because we're then reactionary and we go back and do what we did the last time. We haven't processed that, we haven't dealt with that. So by able to building a strong foundation, then we can, you know, we can create these, you know, these aspirations that we move towards. We can create ourselves more energetically. Then we can, you know, we can be, we'll say, the best version of ourselves. I think a lot of people try to be more than they are, but I think most people aren't even all that they are. They're not recognizing that true potential, that true purpose, that true power. By allowing themselves to do that, by putting themselves first, there's less resentment. Then they feel better about themselves, so then they can give that out.
I think there's, you know, when you don't put yourself first, and let's say, you know, for example, you should be exercising, and you go, well, I'm not going to exercise because I've got all these other things, and exercise is actually a bit of a pleasure thing for me, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep doing these other things, and then that leads you to becoming overweight and unfit, and then that creates more problems.
Yeah.
So by not putting yourself first in the first place, you then create more problems, and then it just exacerbates. It's just
absolutely.
It gets worse, you know.
Yeah, it's just that downward spiral, really.
Yeah.
It's just, for me, I always say, how much do you respect yourself? You know, so for example, eating good food is a form of self-respect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with exercise. Exercise is a form of, you know, I'm respecting the vehicle I inhabit, most physically, through movement, through nutritionally, you know, to build our health up. And if you're not respecting yourself, most people don't, because most people don't love themselves, and that's because it makes you feel that, especially men. Then that's the stuff that I get to work on. That's the stuff we get to look at first. But if you don't do that, you're always going to be in this downward spiral, because you're not valuing yourself enough.
Yeah.
You're valuing other people's opinions over your own opinions of yourself. When you say that out loud, you think, why would you do that? But we do that because we try and fit in some way, or someone might think a certain way of us. We fear judgment more than we fear death. And so there's that judgment. But what is judgment really? It's just exclusion. We're hardwired to be in social groups, to be part of something. That's survival of the species. And so being judged feels like we're being excluded from that. And that feels unsafe to be alone. So this is the perception that we sort of go around. Doesn't mean it's true, but that's where we are.
Yeah, we talk about exercise, and you know, for me, like going to gym is part of it's as important to me as work. You know, that's part of what I do. So it's like, you know, going to work's important. Well, going to gym is as important. It's the same thing, because I have to do that because of the benefits that it gives me and everything else. And I know that if I don't do that, I turn into a different person, basically.
Yeah. So
it's important that I manage that. And I think for other people as well, to, you know, I mentioned briefly about they see it as a pleasure activity. So in a relationship, when they've got, you know, they're married and they've got kids, or in that type of environment, and he wants to go for a bike ride, or she wants to go for a bike ride or a run or something, and they go, well, that's not fair on the other one, because I'm escaping and I'm
doing something I want to do. But it's so critical that they do that, because that's what allows them to operate at their best self, by doing those sort of things, and allows them to then be more calm, and then, deal with the situations and, screaming kids and everything else, because they have looked after themselves and been for a run or gone to gym or whatever it happens to be.
Absolutely. It garners more resilience mentally and emotionally. We get to do the hard things so we can then deal with things when times get hard. But, if we don't do the hard things, we're never going to be in that, be prepared. I always talk about, non-negotiable agreements. What's the non-negotiables? Let go of the non-essential, let go of the things that are not essential, and create non-negotiable agreements, like raising your standards. What version of me do I want to be? Where am I right now? If I'm down here, if you're saying you want to be up here, what's the gap? What's the steps? What's the processes? So it might be the fact that you're overweight down here and you don't eat very well, but you want to be able to be someone who runs a half marathon or climbs mountains, or what can walk in nature even. So what are the steps? Well, the steps are, I go to the gym, I get on my bike, I'll go for a run. Those are the non-negotiables, because those are the things that will bring you up to that standard. And then you get to look at, okay, who's taking me away from that standard? Who's trying to pull me down from there? I mean, it might be those closest to you, but then you've got to have that conversation of why that's even happening. Because if we don't have that communication, relationships are really important. Firstly, with yourself, the self-respect and, raising your standards, but also the relationships of those closest with you, because is what you're doing making them feel unsafe? Years ago, when I worked at fitness camps, and a woman came to me and she was losing weight and she lost 2 stone, she was doing really well, and she vanished. And then I found out that her husband was massively triggered by it. She was coming back home, and there was a full cream cake in the fridge with a post-it note saying, "Eat me." Because he was massively triggered, massively insecure that his wife was becoming more attractive because she was losing weight, and he had this fear of losing her. So he was trying to sabotage her. So that's all on him, as we talked about at the beginning. Not about her, it's about him. But it's just having that conversation. People have these insecurities and don't feel safe, so then they do these reactionary things.
I've seen that exact thing a number of times, actually, quite a few times. That one partner starts looking after themselves and starts training and doing all these things, and then the other one just gets really insecure and just tries to sabotage it, because they're like you say, they're going to just find someone else now because they've left you behind.
Yeah. And it's about having that conversations, and these are the difficult conversations. You see, we think, okay, it feels unsafe. It's like men who say, anything for an easy life, out for an easy life, and they don't do anything. But that's just so disempowering.
Very fake.
Yeah, it's really fake. It's like you need to, find your spine again. Where's your balls? You've got to start owning who you are, and that doesn't mean to say that you have to be nasty to your partner or neglect her in any way. You've just got to reassure her, and you do that through having conversations and saying, "I'm just doing this for me, so then I can give more to you." But men are also great at not having conversations very well. We don't like talking, so it's something that comes back down to courage. Having that courage to be who you are and having those difficult conversations. I know, when I first started working with Geoff, for example, I struggled with conversations, when things were hard, I'd just rather not talk. I remember that. But I remember him saying sometimes the truth is so jarring. He says, but all you've ever got is the truth.
Yeah.
You've got to be truthful and then have a conversation around it. If at the end of the day, it's only you. Everyone else around you can come, can go, can leave, but you're still there. So it's about, being the best version of yourself you can be for you. And then whoever's around you, they either decide to come with you or they don't. That's not on you. That's on them. And yes, they might react in a certain way again, but that's just them being triggered. You're just holding a mirror up, and if they don't like what they see, they either, step away, or they'll attack you in some way, usually verbally, sometimes otherwise. But that's where it is. It's, again, it comes back that you make that change, you send the ripple out, and everything around you changes.
Yeah.
And it's them. I mean, especially and I'm not saying doing this in a bad way. You do it from a place of love. You're not doing it with any malice. You're just. This is how I want to be. I've let myself go. I want to be a better version of myself, for myself and for everyone around me. And yes, that can cause insecurity, but then that comes down to conversations and communication.
Well, it's like they say, fly with eagles, don't they?
Yes.
You fly with eagles, or you can, be on the ground.
Yeah, I'd say you can
soar,
feel that freedom, or you can be in fear.
Yeah.
And I guess, because fear is so prevalent around, it affects everything else.
Yes.
And, you can have all these different kinds of stresses, financial stress, family stress, work stress, nutritional stress, all these kind of things. And if we don't deal with these things, if you think about it as a stress bucket, and it just keeps pouring in, if you don't deal with them, it overflows. That's why, you'll shout at your partner or your kids for no reason at all, because you've had a stressful day, because you're just at this topmost level and it's just overflowing. Or road rage is that easy one. And so that's what we get to look at. What's really going on with me? Because all we're doing is we're just reacting.
Well, a lot of the time you can deal with a certain amount of stress, and obviously it's also good for you as well to be in a certain amount of stress. But you don't do anything about it, and it'll build up, and then you'll suddenly kick the dog.
Yeah,
the dog's like, what's going on?
Yeah, what is that?
You just happened to be the end of my bucket,
Yeah,
you only did something small, and then
yeah.
It's walking around in that state as well, which is incredibly unhealthy for you. Where you're super stressed and you're just on the edge of kind of cracking almost.
Yeah, well, we've got three parts of the brain. The thinking part of the brain is the human brain. We spend the 2/3 or more of our life in the reptilian brain, which is our fight or flight response, our emotional brain, which is the limbic system, and then we just flip between those two, and we're always reactionary. We don't sit down, we don't calm ourselves down, we don't calm our nervous systems down, we don't soothe ourselves. And I think, as babies, when we were babies, we had our parents to soothe us in some way, whereas now, as adults, and I would say there's a lot of adults who aren't really adults. They're sort of adults in child's bodies, because they haven't dealt with for want of a better phrase, the inner child. But there'll be parts of them where they're reactionary because they haven't dealt with anything from when they were 6 or 7, and then they'll behave like a 6 or 7-year-old even as an adult. And I see that all the time. I even see it myself, not so much now, but I laugh at myself. Though there's little Dean. What little Dean Sparry's done me out. What's that about? And I actually laugh, because as an adult I wouldn't behave that way, but I am. So it's something I need to deal with. So
it's very interesting, because I think Jeremy Clarkson just wrote. I don't watch the news or anything like that, but I kind of saw some stuff on LinkedIn about it and what he had written, or what someone else had written, what he had said.
Yeah.
And it was he's just a big man child. I mean, to be fair, what I like about him is that he's very genuine, but he is a man child.
Yeah, I totally agree.
He's what you see is what you get, and he doesn't make stuff up, and he doesn't act or anything like that, because that's him.
Yeah.
And it is genuine, and there's something good about that. But again, man child. Yeah. And I think I mentioned this before about how, in a lot of cultures, especially in Africa where I grew up, there's not me personally, but in the tribes where, they reach a certain age and then they have to go and hunt a lion, or they have to go out and spend 3 days by themselves in the jungle or the bush or something like that. And that marks their transition from a child to a man.
Yeah.
And in Western cultures, we don't have that.
No.
So we just keep going until, until forever, 60, 70, and we still act like a child, because there's been no event where it's gone, you can no longer act like a child. You are now a man, and these are your responsibilities as a man. There's nothing definitive that happens with that in Western culture.
I absolutely agree with that. There's just nothing at all, and that's why we're seeing these man-childs or men-childs moving through, because they've had no male influence, they've had no teachings or where they can take responsibility for their lives, and so they'll not make decisions, and so they're not choosing. So then they'll react in a certain way because they haven't been through the forge, they haven't been through the difficulty, they haven't been through anything that's been challenging enough to then allow them to require them to step up to to be the man of, and it's not about masculine and feminine. We've both got those energies in there. I get that. And, it's just about understanding what being a man is.
Yeah.
Take responsibility for themselves and others is number one, and so many men don't.
Being on this whole journey of yours, where you've obviously explored so much and you've grown so much, how has that helped your relationship with Joy, with your wife?
Massively, yeah, massively. I think it was when Joy was pregnant first, where we realised that there was had a traumatic experience in her childhood, which had been affecting our relationship. Because I often remember thinking, like we were saying before, you just say something and then there was a massive argument. You think, what the hell happened there? And as time went on, when she was pregnant, she went through a really bad pregnancy. First, we couldn't have kids, and then we had kids naturally, and that's how I started this whole journey. But then she was still really poorly when she was pregnant, and it wasn't morning sickness. It was nausea, but it turned out it wasn't morning sickness. It was acute anxiety because of the pregnancy had triggered from her past. And that's when we really started discovering and having more awareness of who we were, but it wasn't, and we still done a lot of work there. But we still had our moments when we had these arguments. I wouldn't say anything, then there's a build up, and then you explode and everything comes out, that's been for the last 6 months or whatever, because you haven't had that communication. But that wasn't until, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, when we started really looking into the emotional realm and emotional healing, and understanding ourselves and understanding why we do what we do, and repressed emotions and how we react when we get triggered by certain events, whether it's something I said or she said or something she did or didn't do, and vice versa. By doing that and understanding how we work, and understanding that the thing is never the thing and there's something deeper, and then being able to feel the sensation that comes up, right? Okay, there's the thought, there's the emotion, sensation. Because of that, we can now sit with that. We can now let that go. We can let go of this stored up energy that's been repressed. And because of that, we can have these conversations. We can see when, if I'm in a bad mood, she'll, we don't have an argument about it. She knows that I need to deal with something, and vice versa. I don't pester Joy of what's wrong, this kind of thing. I know she's dealing with something, and I know she'll be able to do that. And then we can have a conversation about it when she's ready, or when I'm ready. And I think it's massively powerful. And I think something else, I was talking to someone a few days ago about love languages. I don't know if you know about love languages. I can't remember the guy's name.
The 5 love languages.
Yeah, the 5 love languages.
Yeah, I've come across in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone has their own love language.
Yes.
So you could be pouring gifts on your partner, or you could be saying how much you love them. But if her love language is physical touch, and it doesn't have to be sex. It could just be a hug or a handhold, or just something like that, or quality time together, which is another one. They're just completely mismatched. They'll not feel the love because their love language is different. So you might think, wow, tell her how much I love her, or I buy her all these things. But if her love language is, I just want to spend time with you, which is what my wife's is. My wife's is quality time. Mine's physical touch. They're the primary ones. You have a primary and secondary one. But if you don't know that, then you can feel like you're incompatible once all the the initial oxytocin's died down and you're in a relationship. If you don't understand what makes them feel loved, then that can cause all kinds of problems and issues. Yeah. Just having that awareness. And I found that really powerful when I read that book about 8 years ago. I thought, wow, this is really interesting, because the examples and the meanings behind the examples just made so much sense. I thought, no wonder people start hating each other or get divorced. It's not that. It's
kind of so important that kind of information. Like, you need to know what your partner's love language is, so that you can then make them feel love. Because a lot of people obviously want to make their partner feel love, but if you don't, you can just go from your experience, like you say, giving them loads of presents, and they're like being like, this doesn't mean anything to me. And then when the relationship breaks up, they're like, yeah, but I gave you all these presents. It's like, yeah, but that's that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.